Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Watier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Watier, and I'm here as always with my good friend and colleague Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey Scott, how are you?
Doing fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. We're going to be getting into a pretty cool paper that came out. It is called The Impact of Intermittent Fasting on Body Composition and Cardiometabolic Outcomes in Overweight and Obese Adults, a systematic review and meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. So we're going to be talking about obesity as a global health crisis and applying it to the fasting for life way, the lifestyle adaptation that we want for each and every one of you. So if you are new to the podcast, welcome in. Thanks for giving us a listen. Thanks for giving us a shot and making us part of your fasting for life journey. Well, we hope you stick with us. If you want to know more about who we are and why we do what we do, head back to episode 0 and episode 1, give it a listen, and you'll learn more insights into why Tommy and I do what we do with fasting week in and week out with these podcast episodes, our free resources, our challenges, our coaching, etc., because fasting has had such a just transformational effect on us and so many of thousands of others now over the last few years. So welcome in, welcome in. If you are a long-term listener, thank you so much for the likes, the rates, the reviews, and the follows and the shares. We are so grateful that you are on this fasting lifestyle journey with us. And we're going to give a shout out here, Tommy, to our favorite reviews, our 5-star reviews. Yes. We are blessed to have so many of them. So thank you, French teacher Claire, for taking the time to write such a wonderful shout out and giving us a glimpse into your success with what we teach here on the podcast. And she titled it My Fasting Lifeline, Tommy, right?
Yeah. She said, this is my first podcast review, and it's a long time coming. I've been fasting for 1.5 years and decided to really lean into some ADF over the summer. Found your podcast. Whoa, content is incredible. Thank you, Claire. She said, I listen, re-listen, and try to absorb all that I hear and always find something to help me keep staying on the right path. And so she goes on here to say, I'm a 59-year-old woman. I've lost 35 pounds, 15 or so more to go. Congratulations on that. That's huge. And my blood work results are now incredible. Everything's better. LDL, HDL, fasting insulin, triglycerides, all of these well below normal, CRP, et cetera, working towards optimal levels now. And even had knee surgery a few years ago and experiencing zero pain now, which is obviously huge. And I mean, lower inflammation, lower effect of gravity on those joints. That's amazing, Claire. And all in all, just life-changing. And I try to follow your Fight Club fasting rule, but it's hard to contain my enthusiasm. Only challenge is affording all the new clothes I keep having to buy on a teacher's salary. Thanks, fellas. You're doing God's work. That's amazing, Claire. Congratulations. Thanks for sharing your story with us, too.
Yeah, and she actually foreshadows, we didn't plan this, but she foreshadows ADF and some of the blood work and markers that we're going to talk about today. And Claire, just incredible work. And I know you've been part of our ecosystem for a while now and been part of a challenge.
Yeah.
And this episode's coming out during around the holidays, so we're going to talk about that. We're right in between Thanksgiving and Christmas right now. So we'll talk about the holiday season as well a little bit today. But she really foreshadows some of the outcomes that we're going to look at today with the research article. But I was in the knee pain space for a while, in the physical medicine orthopedic space. And one of the assumptions when you have knee surgery is that your pain will be minimal to nothing at post-surgery. And the outcome measures are actually about a 30 to 40% reduction. So if your knee pain, chronic knee pain, was a 7 or an 8 per daily pre-surgery, I mean, best outcome measures, you're looking at a 2 to a 3, 3 to a 4 post-surgery. But the fact that you've been able to get the weight off and decrease all that chronic inflammation in your body, I mean, that's why you have the no pain results that you have. So just reinforcing the fact that consistent efforts and trial and error, which is what I kind of read between the lines here over the years, that you doubled down this summer with ADF. So
Mhm.
just keep up the great work. Keep listening in. Thank you so much. Feel free to break that first two rules of fasting occasionally when your motivation is high, because you've been doing it long enough now where you can be a
Right.
light and an inspiration to others. So
Yeah. Get inspire.
absolutely love it. So Tommy, let's get into this mixed bag of fasting protocols research article here.
Hmm.
And when we're looking at this, this is a review that came out in the Journal of Nutrition earlier this year in the summer of 2025. And it really speaks to one of the main reasons why we do what we do here with fasting, is that obesity is a global health crisis. Projected to affect over 1.53 billion adults by 2035. And
Wow.
intermittent fasting has now, 5 to 8 years ago, when we got into the fasting space, it was still kind of like, yeah, no, I don't think so. Kind of more of like a fad type approach. Remember the acai and the pomegranate and the
Yeah.
weight loss hacks? Because most people come to fasting to try to lose weight. So it's definitely, this study says it's emerged as a potential alternative to continuous energy restriction for weight management and metabolic improvement.
Hmm.
However, previous meta-analyses, we've done hundreds of research debriefs here on the pod over the last 310 episodes. It depends on so those meta-analyses, and the research article states this, they kind of gave inconsistent results. So the knowledge gaps hinder the application or the clinical translation into clinical practice of intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
So what they were trying to do is like a rigorous synthesis of those RCTs to clarify the effects on body composition and cardiometabolic health in overweight and obese populations, right? That's 74.5% of the US population that is either overweight or obese. So if most people are looking at fasting as a simplification, which is we like to look at fasting as a simplification of the weight loss strategy, getting you off that dieting roller coaster, that weight regain train, especially around the holidays, not just throwing the baby out with the bathwater and being like, I'll just restart in January, the old new year, new you mindset.
Yeah.
But really finding some consistency in the inconsistencies of what the research shows. So we're going to kind of outline this in a way and talk, individually about some of the protocols, the strengths, the weaknesses, but most importantly, to French teacher Claire's point, is we want a takeaway for you today. So what is something that you can put into your week, into your day, into this month of navigating the less sleep, more travel, higher incidence of food choices and food exposure around the holidays, so we can keep you on track and you can start 2026 with momentum rather than starting behind the eight ball, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it sure does. Because going into this particular season, you can look at some studies that will show you how the effects of this season can be the overall net outcome of whatever your weight change was for the whole year. That essentially this season could kind of set the stage for it. Now that's not applicable for everybody, but for me, I definitely felt the effects of that. It was almost like I would be working up towards the holiday season, kind of excited and like looking forward to maybe hitting a new weight goal going into the holiday season, because I knew there would be a lot of get-togethers and things like that, and I wanted
Travel
to kind
and all this other stuff,
of
right?
yeah, all of that. And but whatever you do over the holiday season, depending on what those habits look like, what the opportunities look like, it can make a big effect, because you can have a big highly sustained insulin load. You can have additional caloric opportunities. You can have later nights, get-togethers. There can be alcohol involved. There, all of these things.
Family
Less,
traditions, sweets and
yeah,
cookies and grandma's
exactly.
coconut cream pie and whatever else it is,
Sure.
right?
Well, combined with less sleep, right? Like the nights can kind of go on with opportunities or get-togethers, whatever that looks like. All of these things have an insulin load. They all have an insulin effect. So while mere mortals like ourselves with levels of insulin resistance, we might feel these effects greater than somebody else that you might know. Even other friends and family members. So that being said, going into the holidays with a bit of a plan and a framework and understanding what some of the best fasting protocols, what they look like and what the outcome measures look like and how they kind of stack up against each other, can be really helpful during the kind of in between times? What's the rest of my December strategy kind of look like? What do I think I want to do? The week around Thanksgiving or Christmas or
Yep.
whatever that holiday looks like.
Just like French teacher Claire, she's a teacher. So in the summer, she's like, you know what? I've got some more freedom and flexibility. I'm going to double down on ADF.
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
Seasonal.
Well, how do we then sustain that throughout the rest of the year? And she's on a journey. She's got 15 pounds left to lose, and just feeling great. Blood markers are in check. So let's talk about the study just kind of in a 30,000 foot view. They included 15 RCTs, randomized controlled trials, 758 overweight obese adults, comparing intermittent fasting forms like alternate day fasting, time restricted eating. You can think about this like as your 16-8 window, right? Or your 18-6 window. TRE just means intermittent fasting. 5-2, which is 5 days of normal and 2 days of fasting a week. And then different forms of intermittent energy restriction. This is kind of like the hush posh of different combined fasting efforts. And it's just really way too complicated. If you're looking for simple fasting schedules, head to the show notes, click the blueprint to fasting for fat loss, and we give you 4 different weeks of what an ideal kind of strategic, intentional, simplified fasting schedule can look like. And then they compared these to non-fasting controls. And they were looking at the outcomes of weight, BMI, waist metrics, so waist circumference to really indicate what visceral adiposity or visceral fat might be beneath the surface. They looked at, so anthropometrics, they looked at lipid profile, blood pressure, and the glycemic markers, so fasting, blood glucose, and insulin resistance. So when we look big picture at the results, we saw that the 5-2 was easier adherence, but very small improvements in BMI. Not statistically significant, really no change in body weight. And it did notice that there were changes in appetite ratings early, meaning that when you did have these 2 fasting days, that you noticed that you weren't having such a ravenous appetite on the days that you did have more freedom on those 5 days off.
Yeah.
And that weekly cycle allows for more normal eating most of the days, but it didn't result in much statistically significant change, right?
Yeah. And even when we call it like sometimes you'll see those are the feasting days or those are the up days or, whatever the word is there. Sometimes if we're not careful, we can kind of lean into a different behavior on those days. So if they were just normal days, and I'm just thinking about them as baseline maintenance nutrition days, I think that's a good way to think about it if you're going to exercise and exercise utilization of a 5-2 kind of approach, and just knowing that a little bit of intentionality for the week is enough to kind of have some modest improvements in blood markers, modest control over what the scale is doing, and then start to see some improvements in BMI over time with a relatively high adherence level. I think that's a good way to look at it, because if we weren't looking to the 5-2 diet for major significant fat loss results, I think that would be more appropriate. If you could think about it as a potential baseline way of eating.
Tommy, you're reading my mind. This is going exactly back to episode 308 that we just talked about this, where like in the fasting world, 16-8 is like your baseline stabilizer.
Yeah.
If you can just stick to this consistently, this will help you tread water when all the other when it's not the perfect scenario, or your sleep is off, or it's the holidays, or you're traveling, or it's just not the right time to be like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do 72-hour fast until I lose all my weight. Well, no. So this baseline concept is something that I was hoping would come up, and you just alluded to it right there, in that the 5-2 is like more of like the dabbler effect, right? It's like, you'll see some improvements. You'll feel better on the 2 days that you do the fasting or the restricting of the food intake. But on the other 5 days, like if you don't have some baseline food choice habits and sleep habits and exercise habits already in place, you're not going to really probably see much change at all. And that's what the research showed as well.
Yeah. And sometimes by default, a lot of us, especially here in the West, we'll kind of live out the opposite or the inverse of like a 5-2, like a 2-5, almost where the weekend is like these over up days, and then we're lucky to have like 3 or 4, maybe a fifth day of like kind of strung together as far as maintenance level eating, just as a default.
Yeah.
So what I'm proposing here, or what we're kind of seeing, is that if 5-2 was like your new normal, that would probably be a really good balance level to
Yep.
maintain kind of a maintenance level of control. But if you don't go into that with too high of an expectation as far as fat loss and substantial
I'm going to step on
improvements
the
and things
scale
like
and it's
that.
going to be down 3 pounds tomorrow.
Right.
Well, yeah,
I
don't do
doubt
that.
it. I doubt it.
Yeah, doubt it.
Yeah.
Um,
But that doesn't
so,
mean it's not working, right?
right.
And I think that's the important bridge to the important gap to bridge right there.
Because there were changes shown in the appetite ratings and the adherence was high.
Yeah.
Now, if we look at modified ADF in this study, this was the greatest reduction in body weight in LDL. It is the most stringent, more stringent of a schedule, right? Alternate day fasting. So you're fasting one day, or you have a mini meal, 500-600 calories on that day. And there was some interesting outcomes in terms of intake that I want you to share in just a second, Tommy, with these.
Yeah.
But you have deeper fat mobilization. But the longer you go with an alternate day fasting strategy, so you eat one day, don't eat the next day, eat one day, don't eat the next day, the dropout rates go up dramatically. The adherence score goes way down in terms of the amount of people that can stick with that for a long term, because there's too many life variables. It's like, okay, well, great. Date night falls on the right day this week, but next week it doesn't. So what are you going to do?
That's a great example. Yep.
But it had the best metabolic outcome, and we've talked a lot about this, and the best weight loss and BMI improvements.
Yeah, and in one of the studies, and this was just one of the several good, rigorous ADF studies that fell into this meta-analysis. For example, over a 6-month period, and I'm not going to say that it was 100% compliance, because there wasn't, and I'll talk more about that in a second, but over a 6-month period of ADF versus just controlled maintenance eating, and also compared to diligent caloric restriction for 6 months, you had a modest improvement in insulin resistance with the caloric restriction group, about a 17% improvement there. You had triple that improvement in the ADF group. And this is not even fully compliant ADF over those 6 months. So it was substantial, even though the actual body mass change and weight change was basically the same. It was slightly better in the ADF group, but not statistically significantly better than in the caloric restriction group. So that's incredible right there.
And that points to the real world effects of like food choices during your feeding days. Because what they found, and correct me because you had brought this point up, during your feeding days, your on or off days, so on your on day of consumption, there is this propensity in the beginning to compensate with higher calories, refined carbs, and higher fats, the higher hedonic foods. And that can offset the metabolic effects. But what they found was on the fasting days, the caloric intake was supposed to be limited around 500 to 600. It was up over around 1,000.
Yep.
And then on the full nutrition days, which were supposed to be over like 125%, they were under.
Right. Yeah. And so it kind of balanced out in the wash, if you will, as far as average number of calories. But the reason why this is substantial, it's significant, is because one of the big benefits for ADF physiologically, not just on the scale, but in what's going on as far as your HOMA-IR, your levels of insulin resistance, your blood sugar, and one of the big benefits here that you see is because of the fact that you have really strong metabolic switching going on between those nutrition days and your fasting days. So even
insulin comes way down, like you just said, 3 times the effect.
Correct. And that's where a lot of the benefit comes from. So in this study, when they start going out to 6 months, and you see this average number of calories going up on the quote unquote fasting days or the modified fasting days, and then they're coming down on the nutrition days. The problem there is that you're starting to blur the lines. You're diluting the effects of that substantial switching effect, where you're giving the body clear physiological signals between fasting and nutrition. So blurring those lines mean you're actually blurring the results from that protocol. So that's substantial there. And when you take that over a matter of 6 months like that, what you start to see is, okay, ADF being one of the best and most highly studied fasting protocols, but it needs to be understood in respect to small cycles to maintain efficacy and compliance right there. Because when you try to take it out for too long, as we saw in the fasting cure, Upton Sinclair talks about 48 to 72 hour fasts and how no sane man or woman would complete those over and over and over again. It's just hard to stick to. So we've heard numerous stories time and time again. So that's why it's very cool. French teacher Claire, doubling down on the ADF method over the summertime, like within a seasonality like that, because we do the same thing with keto cycles. The recommendation for keto cycles being like a 60 to 90 day keto cycle. That might be a bit long on the ADF cycle, but it could be thought about in the same regard. Maybe a 2-week cycle of ADF, maybe even a 1-month cycle of ADF. But to think that you're going to be able to pull off very, very long-term ADF cycles with a high level of compliance, it's not really realistic from all of the data that we've seen.
So when we look at the 5-2 in the ADF, we talked about the benefits, right? Much greater in the ADF group. Then we had the TRE group. So this is the intermittent fasting group, right? Eating window restricted usually to 8 to 12 hours. Episode 308, we talk about baseline. It should be 16-8 minimum. This is typically all food intake from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. I like that earlier window. No specific food type restrictions, calorie intake reduction based on shorter windows, right? You automatically are going to be stacking the favor of less intake because you have less time to do so.
Right.
And they found that this group, the TRE group, had the second best outcomes in the outcome measures, so the weight loss, the BMI, and some of the metabolic markers. It was in second place behind ADF in terms of outcomes. And I love this concept, and we already mentioned it again, of, holidays, like, why not just some people can push the needle and push the envelope, I should say, and move the needle. However, I would think, like, if we can just maintain and enjoy and focus on the wonderful nature of the holidays, in the experiences and all that stuff.
Take the pressure off.
Take the pressure off.
Right.
The TRE schedules, the 16-8 baseline, still has weight loss, BMI, and cardiometabolic blood lab marker improvement. That might be a great goal for most folks during this holiday season.
That would be a great goal. If you go into that proactively with that being the goal, rather than like shooting for the stars, the trouble with shooting for the stars is as soon as it doesn't feel like it's going well, a lot of times that just kind of goes away, like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, like you said. So if you go into it with a more realistic approach, not trying to like lower the bar or lower the goals for yourself, but just to kind of temporarily compartmentalize it and go, you know what, maintenance, feeling good this week, good energy stores, and not regretting what I did when I go to step on the scale, expecting that, hey, maybe it's down a pound, but maybe it's up, 1 or 2 pounds. But hey, at least I didn't fully restore all of those glycogen stores, put on a little extra fat, and then have to like make up for that time. Like you're not creating a more complex problem for yourself the week after a holiday. And that would be great. That'd be a big win. If you were realistic with yourself and compared that to what's maybe happened in years past, wouldn't that feel like a win? I think for me, it definitely would feel like a win. But sometimes our ego gets in the way, and we like to set big goals, but sometimes they're not necessarily realistic. So if you can be really realistic about it, I think that's going to lead to kind of a better, more satisfying holiday season, don't you?
Yeah, and this is the question I want to pose to you as you're listening is, should you, as someone who's adopting a fasting lifestyle, favor more real-world adherence or chase that deeper, faster result? Because fasting can be very rewarding if you do it a 2 to 3 day fast and you're like, wow, my inflammation's down, I'm not hungry, my brain fog is gone, I'm feeling great.
Never seen this kind of movement on the scale before.
The scale has dropped, the whoosh has happened, right? That's all water weight, that's all that glycogen and the insulin coming down and your blood sugar releasing, the glycogen releasing that water weight, right? And it's like, wow, this is amazing. But if we don't have the real world application, and this is what the research was showing with the food choice component, like the nuance of the food choices, and this potential for refeeding or overconsumption on your days where you typically, air quotes, aren't fasting. That's why we love this baseline approach, 16-8, or in this study, the TRE group. you're still going to see those benefits, but it's not going to be as hard to adhere to. So should we really be chasing that deeper, faster, quicker result all the time? There are periods for that, but consistency always wins, and impatience is a form of resistance, right?
Agreed.
So our expectation isn't matching our reality, so that's typically when we fall off and our willpower wanes and we give up. So when we're looking at one other kind of subcategory of this nuance of the statistics is the ADF, I mean, it was 8 pounds, right, overall. And the time-restricted intermittent fasting group was slightly less, around 6 pounds. Who would take that during the holidays?
Yeah.
But there was one thing about lipids that we noticed that was pretty interesting, and French teacher Claire also notices that she's been doing it consistently since the summer, 6+ months, and over the last year and a half, her blood labs, her cholesterol panel specifically, has balanced out to the best it's ever been. HDL's up, LDL's down, triglycerides are down, inflammation's down.
Yeah.
But in one of these studies, they saw that there was a short-term increase, Tommy, in the triglycerides. So they said that short-term IF, less than 12 weeks, may have resulted in a temporary elevation of triglycerides, whereas long-term interventions optimize lipid metabolism benefits. So when it comes to this, like, do we want the faster, more result on the scale, or do we want that long-term effect on our blood panels? Well, yeah, obviously you know what we're going to go for.
Yeah, obviously, like we're playing the long game here, right?
Right.
Which is anti-diet culture, as far as just focus on the short term, and just having that perspective that yes, like total cholesterol or triglycerides, those can have a temporary uptick. Understanding that during the fat loss process, which most people and most providers aren't going through and they're not seeing most of the time, because most people are on they're staying the same, or let's be honest, they're slowly getting worse over time as far as what's on the scale and what's in the blood work. So if you're proactively making an improvement here, it's likely that we're going to see a slightly different outlook, a slightly different look on what's happening with the scale, what's happening within our blood panels. And so depending on the timing of when you're actually measuring these things, you could see a temporary uptick. But knowing that you've been mobilizing fat stores, and so mobilizing more fat stores, fatty acid oxidation leads to more fatty acid molecules within the blood, and those do balance out over time. So you do see these long-term effects where those do come back down, especially as you get closer to your goal, your target weight. That makes a whole lot of sense. So looking at that almost like, okay, well, that's a normal part of the process. But depending on when you had your blood work done, it might be either surprising or could lead to a different conversation with your provider. If that's something that maybe you haven't discussed that you're doing fasting, or maybe they're not familiar with the actual fat loss process, because most of their patients are not burning fat.
Yeah. Yep, they're treading water or trending up, right?
Yeah, correct.
So when we're looking at this, one other little bit of nuance here is that when we were looking at this study, they did waist measurements with a tape measure, and a lot of these studies didn't show a big change in the waist circumference. The IER group, specifically the 5-2 group, even in some of the ADF studies, they didn't notice this big change. And we talk a lot about visceral fat, right? If you want to know more about it, just search Fasting for Life -visceral fat, and you'll see all the episodes we've done on it. Body roundness index, the metabolic adaptations that happen. And what they found with this is that there wasn't a lot of change with short-term interventions. So we don't want to be chasing that. The visceral fat is a long-term strategy. It took a long time to get there, and there's a lot of factors that inhibit it: cortisol, stress response, sleep, movement, hydration. So we definitely don't want to give up. But if you're seeing that scale consistently trend down or stay the same during this holiday season, that's a huge win that I think we should celebrate, rather than, you'll get to this thing where it's like you did the fast, the scale moved a little bit, but you put those holiday clothes on from the previous year, and you're like, these actually fit better.
Right.
So visceral fat is one of those things that is going to take time to undo because it took a lot of time to get there. So you're still going to get the metabolic benefits. And the gold standard for measuring visceral fat is going to be a DEXA scan, 100%.
Yeah, remember also in some of those past episodes, we talked about what moves the needle for visceral fat, and sleep and stress are
Yeah.
actually the two biggest needle movers, not your overall fat level. So when you're losing subcutaneous fat, when you're losing the rest of the fat around your body, your visceral fat is generally not responding proportionally to that change. And so I think that's really important perspective. And I know you know that firsthand for that being one of the big outcome measures you're targeting,
Yep.
and you can attest to that, right?
100%.
So yeah, just understanding that you get sleep right more of the time, and you start addressing some of the stress or the additional cortisol response that you have, or maybe a chronic cortisol, or maybe it's kind of a different diurnal cycle that you have within your cortisol levels. Now you're looking in the direction that definitely affects visceral fat. And so just remembering that it's not correlated to the calories. Your body can deposit visceral fat even in a caloric deficit. So that's important to note. And also I wanted to point out one thing, which is that in all of these groups, they had control groups. So in all of these studies, they had control groups, and they were generally matched for calories. And so it can be easy to think, well, okay, I mean, if these results are here and they're kind of similar to the caloric restriction, why not just do the caloric restriction if that's what I'm used to? Or maybe you kind of fall back into old habits with the caloric restriction,
Yeah.
and take away the time restriction, right? But the example that I pointed out with the ADF earlier and the triple improvement in insulin resistance for the ADF group over the caloric restriction group is exactly what I want you to focus on. If that little that little self-talk, that little seed of doubt kind of comes in, because the time restricted nature means that your body has a chance for insulin levels to continue to drop over time, which has a huge net benefit regardless of fat loss. So you could be doing ADF or another fasting protocol in maintenance mode and still have major significant improvements physiologically, even if the scale isn't pointing to any change there. So just continue to lean on the time restricted nature, even if the calories kind of add up, right?
Yeah, so the last thing I want to end with today is kind of this customization. Like, how do you make this work for you? And this is something that we coach on. The challenge is designed to help you formulate that strategy and that plan. Trial and error, right? I was just having a conversation with my daughter on the way to school this morning. She's struggling with math, even though her teacher told us that she's above average in math computation. But what she's found in her third grade class is that there's a lack of confidence around it. They fear getting something wrong.
Right.
So we had this whole conversation on the way to school this morning about, like, I had to ask her like 30 or 40 times, but why? But why? But why are you like, and she finally said, well, I'm afraid of getting it wrong. And I'm like, okay, what's the worst thing that happens? Right? So what's the worst thing that happens? You try a fasting schedule for a week and it doesn't work? Well, guess what? That's a lot better than trying a new diet strategy for 6 months and it not working.
Yeah.
Right? So we want to customize and personalize this. So overview, ADF, decrease LDL, decrease triglycerides, and biggest change on body weight. For 5-2, decrease in triglycerides, decrease in total cholesterol, and better appetite control. TRE, intermittent fasting groups, decrease diastolic, BMI, short-term increase HDL, long-term decrease in visceral fat with exercise. So I just want to add that in there. Zone 2 training, right? Zone 2 walking, rucking, resistance training. And then the intermittent, the hosh-posh group of all these different times and move and schedules and just chaos.
4-3, 5-2.
Yeah. Niner. Did I catch a niner in there?
Yeah.
Decrease BMI, decrease triglycerides, decrease LDL, and decrease fasting plasma glucose. I do want to say that in all these studies, blood glucose and we highlighted the one in ADF, the insulin numbers do come down. A lot of these studies were shorter and they didn't have a lot of recommendations on food choices or macronutrients. So I'm not surprised that there wasn't a big, huge statistical significance, but they were trending in the correct direction for blood sugar.
Yeah.
So that's also a positive outcome. So when it comes to this personalization, it's really figuring out what works for you. So we want to encourage you this time of year really just to take the pressure off, put the focus on the holidays, the travel, the experiences, the family, the friends, the kids, the whatever it is. And just know that you have a baseline. Consistent fasting, consistent efforts day over day win in the long term rather than trying to hit a home run and just do, I'm just going to, I went off the rails this week and let me just give myself some reparations and do a 72-hour fast this week. Or I'm just going to, really push the pedal on the gas pedal in my fasting efforts during the month of December. I don't think that's a smart strategy. And the results from this study definitely align with more of a strategic approach, a customized approach. And if you're looking for that customization, you can absolutely head to the show notes and grab that blueprint to fasting for fat loss, and it'll give you some of those schedules, Tommy. Final thoughts
Absolutely.
as we wrap up?
Final thoughts would be, the holidays are going to happen, and there are going to be times when you feel like you kind of got off track, like you just said. But instead of feeling like, oh, you know what, let me just try to do another 72, or let me go for like my next longest fast. Remember back, it's been a few episodes now. I don't remember the number right now, but when we talked about those cognitive changes that happened after like a weekend or just a few days of like some excess caloric intake, and then it could take a week or 2 weeks to kind of get back on track, get those dopamine reward centers back recalibrated in your mind. And the fact that the best way to get past that was actually going for another 36-hour fast or two. So set your target for something smaller. You don't have to go multiple days. Going into a 36-hour fast, you can do that from breakfast one day to dinner the next day, and you're able to hit that. So just going into the holiday season, being realistic and understanding that no matter what your fasting protocol is right now, that it's probably a pretty good baseline, and that you can always hit a few singles, and then it's going to be much easier to pour some gasoline on the fire after that. So stay focused on those singles.
Yep, absolutely. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. All right, Tommy, appreciate the conversation, man. Go put one of the things you heard in today into action tomorrow, today, next week. And we will be back next week with another episode. Tommy, thanks for the conversation, man, and we will talk soon.
Thank you. Bye. So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.